Woman vanished on solo trip. 6 years later, they pull this from the Rio Grande. In the late summer of 2018, 27-year-old Francesca set off on the solo motorcycle trip she'd always dreamed of. This was her anthem of freedom, a meticulously planned journey to see the real, untamed beauty of America from the open road. But that dream twisted into a 6-year nightmare. Francesca vanished without a trace, leaving behind just one clue: a single, mysterious ping from a cell tower somewhere in the remote Colorado mountains. For 6 agonizing years, everyone assumed she'd had a tragic accident. They believed her story ended on some lonely, treacherous mountain pass. They searched the peaks, they scoured the valleys, but the hope they clung to faded with every passing season. But in 2025, when crews pulled a wreck from the murky depths of the Rio Grande, it shattered every single assumption. It proved they had been looking in the wrong place all along. And it launched a new, even more terrifying investigation into what really happened to Francesca. Section 1. The Dreamer and the Journey. To really get the weight of this mystery, you have to understand the woman at its heart. Francesca wasn't reckless. She was a planner, a dreamer with a very practical mind. Living in a quiet Pennsylvania suburb, her friends and family knew her for this incredible spirit and a deep curiosity about the world. She wasn't someone who just had dreams. She was someone who made them happen. And for over a year, her one single focus was a cross-country motorcycle trip. This was no whim. Her apartment was proof of her dedication. Maps covered her dining table with highlighted routes, campsites, and points of interest. She'd spent months researching, saving every penny, and preparing for anything. She bought a top-of-the-line touring motorcycle, a machine she learned to fix herself. She invested in the best gear, reinforced riding pants, a high-visibility jacket, and even a satellite messenger for emergencies. In a cruel twist, that device would fail to be her lifeline. Her family, while they loved her adventurous side, was worried. Of course they were. A young woman traveling alone across thousands of miles of rugged country? It's enough to keep any parent up at night. So, to calm their fears, Francesca made a solemn promise, a pact she made right before she rolled that heavily loaded bike out of their driveway. She would check in every single day. A call, a text, even just a quick, "I'm okay," to let them know she was safe. It was this promise, this simple pattern, that would become the first screaming signal that something was terribly wrong. The first couple of weeks of her trip were pure joy. Her texts home were full of exclamation points and stunning photos of sweeping landscapes, sunsets over the Midwest plains, the majesty of the Badlands, the first glimpse of the Rockies on the horizon. She was living the adventure she had so carefully built. She told them stories about the kindness of strangers, about the deep peace she felt on the open road. It was just her, her bike, and the endless ribbon of asphalt. She felt free, alive, and in total control. Her family started to relax. The daily check-ins were like clockwork. They heard the happiness in her voice, and they started to believe that this trip was truly the journey of her lifetime. She was careful, she was prepared, and she was having the time of her life. But as she rode deeper into the American West, she was also riding straight toward an invisible line on the map, a vanishing point from which she would never return. Section 2. The Vanishing Point. That steady, reassuring rhythm of communication stopped cold on August 22, 2018. Francesca had just ridden into the San Juan Mountains of southwestern Colorado, a region that is breathtakingly beautiful but also notoriously remote and unforgiving. The roads there are a motorcyclist's dream and nightmare all at once. Hairpin turns, steep grades, and terrifying drop-offs with no guardrails. Her plan for the day would have taken her over Slumgullion Pass, a high mountain pass known for its tough conditions and basically non-existent cell service. The very last message her family ever got was a photo she sent earlier that day. It was a selfie of a grinning Francesca with jagged, sun-drenched peaks behind her. The text was simple. These mountains are unreal. Hard riding, but worth it. Talk tonight. That night, her phone never rang. The text never came. At first, her parents tried to be logical. Her mom reminded her dad that she was deep in the Rockies. Of course, the service was bad. She probably found a campsite tucked away in a valley and would call in the morning. It was a perfectly reasonable explanation. But when the next morning came and went with nothing but silence, reason started to fade into a gnawing unease. By the second afternoon of silence, that unease had become pure panic. This wasn't Francesca. She knew they'd be worried. She would have found a way to call, even if it meant riding an extra hour to find a signal. Frantic, her father called her phone again and again, each call going straight to voicemail. He started calling sheriff's departments in every county along her route. What the authorities eventually found was the last and only electronic breadcrumb she left. On the evening of August 22nd, her phone hadn't made a call or sent a text, but it had made a single, fleeting connection with a cell tower near Slumgullion Pass. It was just a ping, an automated handshake that lasted only a moment. It gave them a location, but it was a huge, daunting one. That one tower serviced hundreds of square miles of dense forest, rugged peaks, and deep canyons. That single ping was both a starting point and a dead end. It told them where she was, but it couldn't tell them a thing about what happened. Did her bike break down? Did she crash? Or did she run into someone on that lonely mountain pass? The silence that followed that final, ghostly signal was absolute. Francesca, her motorcycle, and everything she owned had been swallowed by the wilderness, vanishing off the face of the earth. Section 3. The Mountain Search, a 6-year dead end. With her last known location confirmed, the Hinsdale County Sheriff's Office launched a missing person investigation. The case fell to Detective David Miller, a veteran who knew this terrain like the back of his hand. He'd seen the mountains reward the prepared and punish the unlucky. The most obvious theory was a tragic accident. An East Coast rider, maybe not used to these extreme roads, makes one tiny mistake. A patch of gravel on a corner, a moment of target fixation. It could all too easily send a bike over an embankment, completely hidden from the road. The search that followed was massive. Search and rescue crews on foot and ATVs worked the areas around Slumgullion Pass, focusing on the most dangerous curves, peering over cliffs that dropped hundreds of feet. The Civil Air Patrol flew slow, deliberate grids overhead, their spotters scanning the dense forest for any glint of chrome or flash of color that didn't belong. They looked for broken trees, skid marks, anything out of place. But the terrain was their biggest enemy. The San Juans are a vertical world of deep canyons and thick forests, a crumpled blanket of rock and timber that can hide anything. A crash site could be 50 feet off the road and you'd never see it. The search area was hundreds of square miles. It was a seemingly impossible task. Days bled into weeks. They found nothing. Not an oil slick in a creek, not a broken piece of plastic, not a single scrap of her gear. It was like she had just evaporated. The total lack of evidence was baffling. Even in the worst crashes, something is usually left behind. As weeks became months, darker theories began to creep in. Foul play was a real possibility. Was she targeted for her expensive bike? A woman traveling alone can be seen as an easy target. Did she stop to help someone, or was she followed from a town? Investigators dug into recent crimes in the area and interviewed known criminals, but nothing panned out. Then there was the idea that she had disappeared on purpose. Could Francesca have just walked away from her life? Her family flatly rejected it. She was happy, she was successful, and she was incredibly close to them. The careful planning, the daily calls, that's not what someone does when they plan to vanish. It's what someone does when they plan on coming home. Francesca's family was trapped in a state of suspended agony. They flew out to Colorado again and again, organizing their own volunteer searches, plastering flyers with her smiling face in every tiny town and gas station for 100 miles. Her father spent his nights lost in online forums for unsolved mysteries, chasing down any theory, desperate for a clue the police had missed. But as the years crawled by, the official investigation slowed down. The case went cold, becoming another heartbreaking story told in the small towns of the Rockies. For 6 years, everyone believed that Francesca and her motorcycle lay undiscovered somewhere in the vast, silent wilderness of the Colorado mountains. The hope of finding her alive was gone, replaced by the grim hope of just finding her at all, of bringing her home. Her family was trapped in the unique cruelty of not knowing. The world moved on, but for them, time stopped on August 22, 2018. Section 4. The River's Secret. For 6 long years, the mystery of Francesca's disappearance was frozen in time, buried under the weight of Colorado snow. The answer, when it finally came, wasn't found by a persistent detective or a deathbed confession. It was pulled to the surface by a man with a fishing rod, hundreds of miles from where anyone had ever thought to look. The year is now 2025. The place isn't the high peaks of Colorado, but the arid landscape along the Rio Grande. A local fisherman cast his line and snagged something heavy. It wasn't the familiar pull of a log or river junk. This felt different. It was solid, metallic, and stuck deep in the silt. Annoyed, figuring he'd lost his lure on some piece of trash, he and a friend decided to haul it out. For over an hour they wrestled with it, using ropes and their truck. Slowly, a shape began to emerge from the brown water. First a wheel, then a handlebar. Caked in mud and river weed, it was unmistakably the frame of a motorcycle. The authorities were called, and the local sheriff's department showed up, thinking it was probably just an illegal dumping case. They called a tow truck to winch the wreck completely onto the riverbank. As the mud-caked machine was dragged from the water, details started to appear. It was a touring bike, still recognizable despite years underwater. An officer started the routine process of clearing grime off the steering column to find the vehicle identification number, the VIN. He read the numbers into his radio to run through the national database. The response that crackled back over the radio sent a jolt through everyone there. The VIN was flagged. It was linked to an active, high-priority missing person case out of Colorado. The motorcycle belonged to Francesca, a woman who had vanished 6 years ago. The discovery was a shockwave. Francesca disappeared near Slumgullion Pass, Colorado. This spot on the Rio Grande was a world away, a journey of hundreds of miles. The theory of a tragic mountain accident was instantly, completely destroyed. She hadn't crashed in the mountains. She had made it out of Colorado. She had traveled south. As investigators looked closer at the wreck, they found something else. Tucked in a compartment, miraculously saved in a waterproof bag, were some of her personal items. Her wallet, with her driver's license, and a small, waterlogged journal. The name on the license confirmed it. Francesca. The discovery of these items sent a chill through everyone. This wasn't just a dumped motorcycle. This was a scene directly tied to her. The river had held its secret for 6 years. And now, its revelation turned a heartbreaking cold case into a dark, sinister, and urgent new investigation. Section 5. A new investigation. Everything they knew was wrong. The news hit Francesca's family like a physical blow. For 6 years, they had pictured her lost in the cold mountains of Colorado. Now, they were facing a new, terrifying reality. The phone call from Detective Miller, the same detective who led the dead-end mountain search, was surreal. He explained that Francesca's motorcycle was now in their possession, pulled from the Rio Grande. The location was so far from the search area, it defied all logic. Any relief that something had finally been found was immediately swallowed by a wave of new, more horrifying questions. For law enforcement, it was a humbling moment. A 6-year-old cold case was suddenly on fire. The theory they had worked for years, a tragic accident, wasn't just wrong. It had sent them searching in the wrong state for more than half a decade. On his whiteboard, Detective Miller officially struck a line through the old theory. Accident, Colorado, 2018. It was a fiction they had all believed. The area along the Rio Grande was immediately sealed off as a full-fledged crime scene. Forensic teams descended on the location. The motorcycle itself was now the most important piece of evidence, carefully transported to a lab for a painstaking analysis. Was there any damage inconsistent with being submerged? Were there tool marks? Was there any trace evidence, DNA, fingerprints, fibers, from someone else? The personal effects were just as critical. The waterlogged journal, though damaged, was sent to a specialized lab for restoration. What secrets were in those pages? Did she write about a change in plans? Did she mention meeting someone? Every faded word could be the key. The focus of the investigation had shifted completely. This was no longer a search mission. It was now being treated as a potential homicide. The question was no longer if something bad had happened to Francesca, but who did it and why. A new, massive search was launched, this time centered on the river. Dive teams went back into the murky water, scanning the bottom for anything else. Investigators began the monumental task of trying to rebuild a 6-year-old timeline in a place they had never even considered. They pulled old satellite images of the area. They started re-interviewing Francesca's family and friends, asking a whole new set of questions. Did she know anyone down here? Had she ever mentioned wanting to visit this part of the country? They also launched a public outreach campaign in the local communities along the Rio Grande, releasing photos of Francesca and her bike, hoping to jog someone's memory. It was a long shot. 6 years is an eternity. Memories fade. But they had to try. They were looking for anyone who might have seen a woman on a touring bike in late 2018. A waitress, a motel clerk, a gas station attendant. Any forgotten encounter could be the thread that unravels this whole thing. The discovery in the river had given them their first real lead in 6 years, but it had also shown them just how cold the trail truly was. Section 6. The Unanswered Questions and Lingering Mystery. Finding Francesca's motorcycle answered the question of where, but it ripped open a Pandora's box of new, terrifying questions about how and why. Investigators were no longer dealing with a mountain crash. They were staring into the abyss of a probable abduction and homicide. How did she travel hundreds of miles south from Slumgullion Pass to the Rio Grande without leaving a single trace? After that one cell tower ping in Colorado, her phone was never used again. Her credit cards were never touched. Her bank accounts were dormant. This screams that she was not in control. A person on a road trip, even a spontaneous one, uses money. They contact people. They leave a trail. Francesca left nothing. This led investigators down several dark paths. The main theory? A targeted abduction. Did she meet someone on that remote pass? Someone who offered help, or faked needing it, only to overpower her? In that scenario, she was forced to travel south, her captor deliberately keeping her offline and off-grid. Her motorcycle might have been driven by her abductor or hauled in a truck, only to be dumped far away from the initial crime scene. a classic tactic to throw off an investigation. Dumping the bike in the river feels cold, calculated. A second theory, though less likely, was that she did travel south voluntarily, but with someone who meant her harm. Could she have met another traveler, a charismatic stranger, and changed her plans? Maybe she agreed to ride with this person, and for a while, it was fine. Then, somewhere on that journey, things turned violent. It could explain the travel, but it doesn't explain the complete radio silence. That promise to her family was sacred. It's hard to believe she would have willingly broken it for days on end. A third possibility is that she was running from something. Was she being followed from Colorado, forcing her on a desperate, unplanned flight south to escape a threat? It would explain the erratic path and the lack of communication. But it begs the question, a threat from who? There was nothing in her life or her background to suggest she had enemies or was in any kind of danger. The bike itself offered few immediate clues. Forensics suggested the damage was consistent with being dropped from a height and sitting underwater for years, but there weren't the telltale signs of a high-speed road crash, like shattered plastic and deep asphalt scrapes. This adds weight to the theory it was deliberately pushed from a bridge or a high bank. The biggest mystery is the black hole in time between the mountain and the river. That period from late August to early September 2018 is a complete blank. The discovery of her motorcycle proved she didn't just disappear into thin air. It proved she was moved. And the terrifying truth is that her journey didn't end on that mountain. It ended somewhere else, in a far more sinister way, and the person responsible has held that secret for 6 long years. The investigation into the disappearance and probable homicide of Francesca is active and ongoing. 6 years have passed, but for her family, the pain is as raw as the day she went missing. Investigators believe that someone, somewhere, knows what happened. Someone may have seen Francesca or her distinctive motorcycle between southwestern Colorado and the Rio Grande in late August or early September of 2018. If you have any information, no matter how small you think it is, please contact the authorities. What you remember could be the missing piece that finally brings justice for Francesca and some measure of peace to her family. Please share her story. Keeping it alive is crucial. Someone out there knows the truth. It's time for that truth to come to light. In 2018, Francesca, a 27-year-old woman full of life, vanished on her dream motorcycle trip. For 6 years, her family and police searched the Colorado Rockies, believing she was the victim of a tragic accident. The discovery of her motorcycle in the Rio Grande in 2025 changed everything. It was a breakthrough that brought her family one step closer to the truth, while plunging them into a grief that was somehow even deeper. We now know Francesca didn't crash in the mountains. Her journey continued for hundreds of miles. But this knowledge has only sharpened the edges of the mystery. Finding her motorcycle answered one question, but created a dozen more that are far more disturbing. It points away from a random accident and towards a deliberate, human act of violence. For Francesca's family, the long, cold winter of not knowing has turned into a painful new season of seeking justice. They now know their daughter's journey ended in the worst way imaginable, but they still don't know who is responsible. The person who stole Francesca's future also stole her family's peace, leaving an open wound that can't begin to heal until they have answers. Somewhere between a lonely mountain pass in Colorado and the quiet depths of the Rio Grande lies the truth of Francesca's final days. And a vibrant young woman, who only wanted to see the world from the open road, is still waiting for that truth to be found.